Good evening, everybody. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing well.
Doing well.
Doing great.
Excellent. We're going to give it a couple minutes here while we wait for everyone else to get signed on and get their audio going. You have 2 bottles tonight that we will be and Ian, that one?
Yeah. Go ahead.
That's the one you're
Oh,
getting.
yeah, got it.
Mr. Gentry, glad to see you joining us this evening.
I made it, James. Sort of.
Sort of.
I feel like I'm at freaking work with all you guys.
You know, I can't get away from you guys. Except for Tony. We didn't see him today.
Yeah, he's slacking off somewhere.
I think he was actually working today.
You can. I'll trade places with you. I'm good with that. You can deal with the tech I'm dealing with.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Look, we're even getting Teresa, or at least her husband, tonight.
Yes.
I was here last week. My video where I'm at isn't very good. So
Mr. Baker, good to see you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good to be here.
I want to make sure we get everyone on here, so just bear with us a couple more minutes while we go through this. Like I said, there are 2 bottles tonight, so if you want to go ahead and pour bottle number 1 out, feel free. Maybe let it air out a little bit.
So should I use my fancy little?
Yes. Do you know what that glass is called?
It's called the Fun Cup.
I'll take that for $1. That is a Glencairn.
Glencairn. Yes.
And
I did
actually,
know that.
while we're waiting for everyone else to get joined on here, I want to introduce the young man who did all the laser etching on these glasses for us. Ken Bro, sir, how you doing?
Doing good. How y'all doing?
So Kenny is the person who did all the laser etching on these glasses. He can laser etch, custom etch your bottles. He can do, in fact, our Glencairn toppers that you guys have. Kenny did these as well. Can you do powder coating, laser coating, or laser etching? You see the bottle he's holding up there, laser etched on that bottle. So if you want to do a gift to someone, or you get a special release bottle and you want to commemorate it somehow, get with Kenny. He'll be happy to help you out with that and get you some pricing on that. There's a cup he laser etched. Tom, I believe you had Kenny do some work for you, didn't you?
I did. I had him do a few things, 3 different things. One was laser etching a bottle for one of my neighbors for Christmas. And then I had him laser etch 8 different glasses for my parents for their tiki bar. And then I've also had him cut out a template that I could use when I was making a cornhole board. I just sent him a design and he was able to cut that into a template so I could use it, to spray paint the design I was putting on there. It's fantastic work, just really fantastic.
So now, go ahead, Kenny.
I was just saying thank you, Tom. Thanks for the mention.
Not a problem. We'll post some information how you get a hold of Kenny, but just on probstguild.com, if you want to shoot Ken a PM, he'll be happy to help you guys out. All right. Without much further delay, we always say we're going to start as promptly as we can. So I'm going to throw up our flavor wheel. I'm sharing my screen. You guys can see the flavor wheel?
Yes, sir.
All right. So let's jump in here feet first. We're going to start off, like we said, we always start off with looking at the color. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of thinking a little burnt orange here.
A little bit.
Hook up.
What are we getting on the nose on this one? Don't all talk at once now.
I'm getting some corn, some caramel.
Okay.
Got you a little bit of sweetness, but a lot of heat.
Again, almost a little honey sweetness.
Okay.
I have a feeling I know what it is, but I'm not quite sure yet. Just by the nose.
So let's go ahead and take our first sip. Always a favorite. And I remember our first sip kind of cleared the palate. Our second sip is really where we're going to go out those flavors, right?
James, did you say another one of your favorite bottles?
You might hear a statement in a minute. So what are some flavors you're getting off of this one? Let's, kind of look at that flavor wheel. Is it sitting at wood, grain, spice, sweet, floral?
I'm doing
Banana.
Banana.
a lot of spice.
I definitely got a little tobacco spice.
Okay.
Yeah, a ton of heat and spice.
There is some heat. Now, is that heat from the proof or is that heat from rye?
It doesn't taste like proof heat. It tastes like, yeah, maybe rye heat.
So maybe a rye heat. Okay.
I mean, but to me, rye is more spicy, and this is heat.
Right in the back of your throat?
This one's more on the front.
Yeah, I agree. It's on the front of the lips.
Kind of like black
pepper. I'm getting it more in the back of the throat is where I'm getting it.
So Eric, try and hold that in your mouth a little bit longer before you swallow. See if that changes it. So I know we've got a broad range of people on this with experience. All the way from, well, Brooker's not with us, so I'm going to pick on Kendall, who's got, is on the beginning edge of his drinking career, all the way up to, I could throw several of you guys under the bus, but I'm not going to. On the top of his, drinking career. So are we thinking? Obviously, this is a whiskey. Are we thinking bourbon, single malt, rye? Where do you think this falls, guys?
Go with the high rye bourbon.
High rye bourbon.
Definitely bourbon.
Definitely bourbon. All right, so we're all thinking bourbon.
Got
And
some-
Jeremy, I'm sorry, Marcia?
It could be a cast strength.
Okay. And Jeremy, you made a comment earlier about the corn or sweetness on it, and then we're coming back to rye. So that's where you're saying that high rye bourbon.
Yeah, it's like it's not a proof spice you're getting. Like the nose is really spicy, but it's not a proof spice. I think that rye is just peeking through and kind of hitting you a couple times along the way.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't think it's nearly dark enough to be a cast strength anything. It's super, super light in color.
What do you think of it? Do you guys like it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have a bottle of it.
I'm pretty sure I have a bottle of it too.
All right, so I'm not gonna hold suspense a lot here. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk about with this distillery with a really good friend of mine. So without much further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and announce who this is. And this is our phony iPhone user. If you want to announce yourself, this is Still Austin. This is the musician from Still Austin. Josh Madere is joining us. How you doing, sir?
Hey, howdy. How's everyone?
What's up, Josh?
So, real quick, let me introduce who Josh is. Josh is the education and tour and just all around, I've said it for 50 different times. Josh is a whiskey nerd, a spirits nerd, not just whiskey, but a spirits nerd. And I'll say up front, I have learned a lot from Josh. A lot of what I know comes from spending time with this man, and it's Still Austin. So I'm going to turn this over to Josh. Josh, you're going to become a presenter here for a minute, and then you can throw up your quick slide deck. We're going to go through a quick presentation, jump through bourbon, and then we're going to jump to bottle number 2. But I'll let Josh tell us about that.
Stellar. Hi, everybody. Might actually recommend we actually crack into that bottle number 2, because in the presentation it kind of starts with that one.
Okay.
So if y'all have a second glass, let's get that out.
Actually, if you guys want to go and open your swag kit, you will find some glassware in there.
Sweet. Do that.
Well, you can smell the juniper.
That's handy information you're holding out, James.
Cool. Just watching you all open manila envelopes. Got like Inspector
the winner is?
Gadget in my head, you know.
Oh, wow.
Josh, you should be able to share and take over as presenter now, sir.
Cool, I will do so.
That is fantastic.
That smells good.
Stellar. Okay, cool. I'm gonna hop in there. I'd say I've got a pretty, I wouldn't say brief presentation, but I'm gonna run through it. James asked that I drop some knowledge on you folks. I know we've got a broad spread of knowledge and information that you guys have in your head about this stuff in a big range. And so I'm gonna make sure we cover our bases. We're gonna go through our gin, what it is, how it works. We're gonna finish up with bourbon. I'm gonna talk you through all of it. And then I hope you will have lots and lots of questions. I imagine you will. We're going to kick it off with the Naturalist. This is our gin. Our gin, we're very proud of it. This took a freaking year out of my life to get this thing put together. This was a lot of work. We did a lot of tasting, all these different iterations, all these different types of proof. We're really proud to be sharing this with you right now. So I'm going to be walking through what makes the Naturalist what it is. One of the things I point out first is the spice some of you have been talking about. This gin is made from a rye base. We're proud to have the first rye-based gin in Texas, and we are also a grain-to-glass distillery, meaning we make every drop of our spirits ourselves on site from scratch, and that includes the base for the gin. So rather than starting with a neutral spirit, something like a vodka, we're actually starting with unaged rye whiskey. This is distilled in our 2 stills, both our large column still, which I'll swing to, and our smaller pot still. So 2 types of stills, and I'll go into more on each of them, but it's interesting to think that this is made in small 100-gallon batches, which is pretty darn stinking small. We only use organic botanicals, and the Naturalist as a concept represents our connection to nature. That means that just like her smelling that grapefruit, you have to touch grapefruit fields to make this gin. You have to touch the juniper. You have to taste it as it's coming off of the still and make your cuts. It's a very hands-on approach. And the Naturalist as a concept represents our identity as Austinites and our connection to nature. You know, Amber having this photo behind her of these, what is that, Hamilton pool? We live in this city, right? And we know that, you know, Elon Musk moving here is cool and all, but if he wanted the green belt, we'd all chase him out of town. You know, this is a community that would go to war for our bats. We did over some salamanders in Barton Springs. And we think the green spaces, bluebonnets coming back year after year, and the wide open Texas sky is really important to us. So this smaller pot still I'm going to talk about is the Queen, is what we call the still, named after the Queen of England. This old gal who, true story, every morning starts her day with a gin cocktail before lunch, which we thought was pretty hardcore for a 94-year-old, no doubt. This is a very small still for lots of folks, only making 47 gallons of our gin at a time, which is pretty darn stinking small. In terms of putting all the flavors from each of the botanicals together, gin, the most important part, in my opinion, is finding balance. Now, you can obviously have certain flavors that stand out more than others, just like with whiskey as you smelled through. But the idea is to kind of counterbalance and to not just go all citrus, though you can smell citrus, right? Not just go full spice, although you can pick up spice on the mouth. You want to kind of dial forward and back all of these components. And this is everything that's in our gin. So I'm going to run through those for you really quickly. Gin, in terms of definition, gin has to have juniper. Here in Texas, we call juniper cedar. You know, cedar. Juniper is a part of what we do. It's this crazy plant that grows as far north as the Himalayas and as far south as sea level, from the Arctic to sub-Saharan Africa. It grows freaking everywhere, and it is a iconic flavor. Don't ever eat the berries. ever. They're really bad for you. They're gross. And they taste like crap. But when they're infused into spirits, gin, it has this nice aromatic kind of citrusy. It's not quite as piney as the stuff you're thinking of, but it's certainly there, especially in our gin. Some common botanicals that you will see in many gins include coriander. Coriander is the fruit of the cilantro plant, or we call it cilantro seed. It's not quite the same as cilantro, though. I kind of think it tastes more like lemon peels and dried sage. We also have orris root and angelica root, and those are two things that when I say no one ever has any idea what the hell I'm talking about. Orris root is the iris flower. It's this bright perennial flower that changes color all the time, and it tastes like red pozole broth. Come at me, I'm telling you. I'll make you a single orris root gin, and it will taste red, spicy, and bitter. And angelica, named after angels. It's this little plant that would spring up overnight and be 10 feet tall all of a sudden, and these fronds would pop out in the middle of this marshland, and it would be medicinal. And so they would be like, oh man, the kid's sick, and boom, there's this angelica plant just sprouted. There it is. Let's use it, and it would help with inflammation. So always thought to be sent by angels in like 10 different languages. We also have citrus. Of course, I'm hoping some of you are smelling citrus in the nose, and we've got 3 types. Lemon and orange, both are common across the gin category. Citrus, if you can imagine, almost adds an effervescence, a lightness, a lift, if you will. But wanting to be a little bit different in that category, we went with grapefruit. It's just a Texas thing. If you know, you know, and we like our grapefruits here. Now, the rye itself is going to contribute spice, and so we wanted to balance that spice in interesting ways. So we used 2 different types of cinnamon. You may not think about the different types of cinnamon. One's that big red, you know, that spicy, that gum or the soda, and the other one's that earthy, kind of sweet, that cinnamon roll. So there's 2 different types of cinnamon. We use both. We also use Jamaican allspice, which is so called because it used to taste like all these different things, like cloves and ginger and nutmeg and cinnamon all bunched together. It's the dried pimento berry. This is a pretty cool little thing. It's also kind of an inside nod to our master distiller, kind of an inside joke, like, hey, this one's for you, Mike, since he is actually Jamaican. And then in terms of floral and herbal, we've got 2 here. Elderflower, which we've seen used so often, it's the main flavor behind Saint Germain, and tarragon, which it was actually in bloom right across about 20 feet away from the still when we were working on it. And we saw this bright orange flower and we said, hey, let's see how it tastes. And it worked out pretty well for us. So we ended up including tarragon. Now, if I were to give you a quick, very brief snapshot, imagine I'm trying to pack 500 years of gin history into just a few short slides. The gin's been through a lot, y'all. Gin's gone through some changes over time. Started way in the day with war. If you haven't heard, Europe used to have a lot of problems with wars. There was all this conflict. There were all these churches fighting each other. There were countries starting and ending and starting over again. And the English sided with the Dutch against the Germans and the French, particularly the French. They were very Catholic at the time. And so the Dutch and the English joined forces, and when they go into battle, the English would drink a beer, and the Dutch would do a shot. Now, who do you think felt better running with their bayonets down the hill? The Dutchmen. They had this thing, they called it Dutch courage, is what the English had a short name for it. It was this stuff called GENEVER. And GENEVER was this Dutch gin. It's the precursor to gin. It was made from grain, and so it's almost like new make whiskey, unaged white dog with some juniper berries in it. Then turns out that by the end of the war, the King of England was a Dutchman. So all these nobles in England started kind of saying, oh, what's the king drinking? I have a theory that King Arthur is actually based on this king because he had a wizard, and so I think he was a distiller. You know, you had this round table, and so you ask him, he goes, hey, what do you need? I don't know, I'm a Dutchman, right? His one true love was Guinevere, which to me sounds a hell of a lot like Genevieve, right? So I've got some theory on it, but long story short, everyone in England got hooked on this new hip thing, this GENEVER, that they all affectionately called gin. Y'all didn't go so well. This is absolutely propaganda. But if you look at the difference between these 2 photos, we've got Beer Alley, quintessential English. They're all fat and happy and well read. They're painting, they're celebrating life. And Gin Alley is not exactly the same thing. Gin, this dude sharing a bone with his dog, and everyone's bad. It did not go so good. They did not know how to drink this stuff. And so the English tried to outlaw it in fighting the king. And so they created their own prohibition. As you know, those prohibition things don't go so well. So people started drinking it anyway. It evolved into this thing we call Old Tom Gin, because back in the day, the police had to get a warrant to charge somebody with moonshining. And so this guy put up this cat, and if you walked up to the cat, you meowed, and you put a coin down into its mouth, this gin would come out. And so you can never put a face to a name. You could never get a warrant because you never knew. Now, I think that sounds really gross today by COVID standard. You know, somebody put their mouth on it and all that kind of, right? Let's be real. This stuff was not good. The English did not know how to make gin well. They've been beer people. They didn't really get it. Today, it would look a lot, we'd almost call it bitters. Sometimes the stuff was black. Sometimes it was barrel aged. Sometimes they would add sugar to it. A lot of times, actually, to make it more palatable. Almost more like old Malort back in the day. Today, Old Tom Gin, much better. We're not putting turpentine in it anymore. And the category kind of made a comeback as we started exploring pre-prohibition cocktails. So if you see Old Tom Gin today, check it out. I promise it doesn't have anything toxic in it. But in the 18th century, it might have. Technology came a long way. This guy, Amos Coffey, invented this thing called the column still. It was this idea of continuous distillation, and it allowed them, from an industrial perspective, to take really cheap and sometimes really bad Irish and Scottish whiskey and rectify it, is what it's called. It's turn it into something that would be a little bit more useful, and that was a very neutral spirit. You can make high proof, neutral. Clean is like the optimistic way of saying very neutral. I'm just trying to be completely neutral here. But yeah, they would basically make lots of neutral spirit. At the time, the English had traveled all around the world. You know, the sun never set on the English Empire. London was this like center of commerce as spices, citrus, herbs, fruits from all around the world are coming to London and getting infused into gin. Economies got better, industrialism got better, James Bond got more handsome. People started drinking more and more gin, right? And London Dry Gin was this kind of response to that old sweet, Old Tom stuff, the new, the hip, the dry, clean, crisp. And that was what was in. Of course, Prohibition happened in the United States, and as you know, it didn't go so well. So in the United States, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. We basically took a step back towards Old Tom, right? People are making it in bathtubs. They're sweetening it with turpentine and sugar and all kinds of stuff. And so a lot of times you folks were growing up, when I was growing up at least, we had this idea that London Dry was actually the good stuff because they'd kept those same traditions. And gin had, for lack of a better word, kind of a bad rap in the United States for a long time. But then we moved into the craft spirits movement. And I mean, it's mind-boggling how many distilleries there are in the United States. But I mean, if you reflect on how much this industry's changed, I don't want to grandpa you, but guys, when I started bartending, we called Shiner Bock an import. We didn't have the term local beer yet. You know what I mean? Like it's changed a lot. Our food preferences, you know, I didn't know how to pronounce quinoa 10 years ago, and now I've had quinoa whiskey. There's a whole lot of creativity and a lot of imagination in this industry. I guarantee you there's no way any of you can name every one of those distilleries right in this area because there's so much and it's changing all the time and there's a lot of excitement. And so we are part of that craft spirits renaissance. Where I think we stand out is the rye gin base, which is almost kind of a hat nod to GENEVER, that idea of tasting the grain in it. We also worked really hard to get it balanced, not even exaggerating when I say about a year, to taste it, to formulate it. You know, you can make the gin in about 4 days, but you're not going to get it right in 4 days alone. It took a lot longer than that to nail it. And the organic botanicals. We work at the company Star West in California that prides themselves on fair trade, sustainable, allergy focused, it's kosher, it's all these things where they're very mindful about representing the best botanicals and the highest quality that they can get. And we think that's really important and really kind of aligns with us. Another thing that I think is really kind of a low-key, this might be a secret, I'm guessing not all of y'all know this, but in the label itself, we actually have some of the botanicals in our gin hidden in plain sight. So she's holding a grapefruit, she's hiding behind the rye. The rye is what's jumping out right in front. And if you look at it up close, there's actually this tiny little bluish hue to each of the seeds. And rye, when it gets into its dry phase, will have almost a little bluish hue. Orris at the front, the Angelica root, we keep our classic cardinal. She's got some elderflowers in her hair. But there is juniper. It's just in the background, right? When we were trying to represent the art, the craft, the imagination, and the energy that went in to making this spirit, one of the things we were thinking is it's almost like we're making art. And we wanted to reflect the art that we're putting into the bottle and honor it with the art on the outside. And that's why we started working with this local artist named Mark Burkhart. And this is to give you a sense of his aesthetic. We really loved it. There's something it feels really old, right? It feels vintage, it feels old school, but there's a newness to it as well. Some of these images, I feel like it's hard to kind of place a time. They definitely have this historical kind of mindset, while a freshness into the perspective. And so we really value his works of art and the partnership we have with each of the labels for all of our bottles. Which brings us into the musician, our bread and butter, our baby, our love song to our city, our straight bourbon. We use a high rye mash bill, which is some kind of prize I'm going to give to. Who was that? Was that
Jeremy?
It was Jeremy. Cool. Everyone moved a little bit. Yeah, very nice. Well done. High rye mash bill, 70% white corn, 25% rye, 5% malted barley, which is about 2.5 times more rye than your run-of-the-mill bourbon. Obviously, every mash bill is different. Everyone does different things. We like that sweet and spicy characteristic. As Texans, we got a little bit of a sweet tooth, but I think we also like a little spice. You know, we put salsas on our breakfast tacos. You got to have a little bit of heat. And so we wanted to kind of find that balance and find that sweet spot, pun intended. And so we only work with Texas grown grain. We think that's important as well. If we're going to say we're tasting Texas, we want to taste Texas from start, from grain all the way into the glass. We also use a higher quality grain. You know, when it comes to corn and making bourbon, by far, I think the most common type of corn that's out there is this yellow dent that's very good for making alcohol. That's ethanol production is one of the biggest uses for it. If you think every time you've gone to the gas station and seen the word ethanol, they're talking about alcohol. We're talking about high proof. It's the same stuff Willie Nelson's putting in his biodiesel, right? You're just making high proof moonshine and it can run your engine, right? Now, in our mouths, we don't necessarily want a whole lot of flavor. Well, in our mouths, we want flavor. In our carburetors, we don't necessarily want a lot of flavor. So we use a type of corn that's got a whole bunch of flavors. This white corn that is a chef grade. Think kind of more like our corn tortillas. If you go to the store and buy corn, it's going to be yellow. But we use that white for the masa, for our pozole. It's a bit more flavorful. I grew up in the country. We always called that stuff deer corn. They could smell it from miles away. It's really rich, flavorful stuff. Now, to make bourbon, in case anyone, just covering all my bases here, this is a handy way of remembering them, all of the components that go into making bourbon. Bourbon's got to be made in the United States. So A. B, the barrel has to be all of these things. It has to be oak, it has to be new, and it has to be charred. Corn has to be the main ingredient. D, E, and F are a bit nerdy. It's okay if you black out for this part, but it has to be distilled below 160 proof, so you can't just barrel age vodka. It has to be entered into a barrel below 125, so you can't put it in when it's lightning hot off the still. It has to be watered down first, but you can't water it down too much before it goes in the bottle. And you can't add anything except for water to it if you're going to call it bourbon. We've got a pretty stellar still. I encourage you to come by. I know you guys were on the horn with my buddy over at Balcones. I think Alex is who you're talking to. Not too long ago. We also have a Forsyth still. Our still is a little bit different. It's 42 feet tall. It's a bit big. Named her Nancy after this character from this corny sci-fi movie from back in the day called The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. It's this kind of classic, iconic, corny movie poster that I definitely remember growing up. It was hanging up big in the Alamo Draft House. And so, in a sense, this is our gigantic monster of a still. What makes this still so different is the concept of rectification, which is how you separate aldehydes and flavors using gravity. I'm not sure if I don't want to go too far into the deep end, but I absolutely can. The idea is if you imagine vapor condensing and turning into liquid and going down, but then getting hot and turning back into gas and going up, imagine at each one of these trays, it looks just like this. There's a different set of flavors. On the bottom tray, there's going to wind up being more flavor, more texture, more oils, whereas at the top, it's going to be a lot more neutral. And so this gives us the ability to kind of play with that space in between to really dial it in, to find the right ratio of flavor to kind of cleanliness so that we can really maximize how that tastes. We figured there's no sense in doing all of this and working with Texas grown grain if we're not going to taste it. We're not trying to make gas station ethanol. We're trying to make stuff that you can actually taste and taste pretty darn good. We also are doing this in Texas, and doing it in Texas is unlike anywhere else in the country, because if you don't know anything about Texas, it's kind of unlike anywhere else in the country, right? And so we get some crazy weather. Y'all remember February?
We're trying to forget it.
Remember we got 2 snows this year? We got 1 snow, and it was okay. It was all pretty and stuff. And then all of a sudden it was swimming pool weather. And then power grid went out. And then we're back up to the 80s again a week later. Aging in Texas is kind of unlike aging anywhere else in the world. Not because it's hot, but because you got to roll a dice every day and you have no idea what the heck it's going to be. It feels like 3 days ago, it was about 40 degrees out when I went to take the dogs out, had to put on a hoodie. What we do is to kind of mitigate some of that heat and that extremeness is we add a little bit of water while it's in the barrel. It's this technique called slow water reduction that allows us to really maximize and coax flavors out of it. If you've ever had somebody tell you to add a splash of water to your whiskey to let it open up a bit, imagine we do that 6 months in advance before we even take it out of the barrel. And imagine that every single barrel goes through a different program. So I've seen as few as 3 of these steps and as many as 9. So every single barrel tastes different. And so we almost think of them like raising our kids. Imagine you have a litter of puppies. Day 1, you can't tell the difference between any of them. You know, maybe one's a different color, but by the first week, you can tell one of them's got a little bit more personality. One's got a floppy ear, right? You start to build those noticeable differences. And it's the same with our barrels. Even a couple days after it's filled, you start to notice differences. And so we adapt and we give each barrel what it needs to get the most depth, the most complexity, and the richest flavor that we can. I thought I'd run through some of our tasting notes. These come from our master blender, Nancy Fraley. I was listening in with some of y'all. So these are some of our, official. The thing is look, we all have different mouths, but I was delighted to hear banana in there. I think in the nose, you're always going to get vanilla, caramel. I think butterscotch is the thing I always associate with our bourbon. The palate, I love to point out the mouthfeel, the texture, the richness, the roundness on the palate, and that kind of cinnamon that lingers, especially on the outside, on the bottom sides of your tongue. That long kind of cinnamony finish that I really associate with the rye. And thank you so much. You've listened to me ramble at you for quite some while, and it is only fair to see if y'all got any questions. So what up, y'all?
Well, Josh, I'll start. Do you use any local juniper in the gin?
we started looking into that. We definitely explored that. We did not find it had the flavor that we wanted.
Agreed.
Not to say that it's necessarily bad. There is a gin that I love that actually uses Texas juniper, but it turns out it has to be, if it's going to be wild, then it has to be foraged for. The berries I've heard take between 1 to 3 years to ripen on the bush. And the way that you harvest them is you actually have to take a staff and whack the bush, if you've ever heard of a bushwhacker, and it thrushes, and you have to do the appropriate strength. If you do it too hard, you'll knock off berries before they're ready. And so the idea, the skill set, I don't think any of us were super pumped about running around in the hill country with the high boots, but we looked into it. But we did check it out. So there are some that it can be done, but we just found the flavor out of the Croatian stuff to be pretty nice.
So you're saying this won't help with our cedar allergies, though, if we drink enough.
It's not like the honey.
Since it's not, it's not quite the same, right?
I guarantee if you drink enough of it, you'll feel better.
Josh, while you were talking about the naturalist, I ran out and made a bee's knees.
Yay, awesome. I love that drink. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's really great. Thank you for introducing me to it.
Stellar. Awesome.
Now, is the naturalist the same as your other gin?
It is. It is. We just wanted her to match her sister, to be honest with you. Yeah, this is the older version and the newer. It is exactly the same juice, but we just wanted them to match, you know.
Yes, and the old label is beautiful, but the new label is equally as beautiful.
Both local artists.
I am noticing a theme with the red cardinal. You're putting a bird on it.
Got to put a bird on. Got to put a bird on. For me, I think when I look at the musician, everyone in the company kind of taken a different stab at this. None of us are exactly like art critics, folks, but we've tried, and we've tried to look into it. Some of the things I always notice is I feel like the hair. You'll notice there's 6 little
hair guitar.
Little hair, yeah. So I kind of describe it as the hair guitar. It might be a ukulele or banjo or like a violin or something. But for me, I recognize that the bird is the same color as her lips. And so to me, it almost represents the song. And so if the musician is the idea, there's something about the creative energy and the confidence and the imagination that goes into writing a song and to performing a song. It's always slightly different every time you do it. There's something about that energy that's like a static electricity, and you can just kind of feel it, And I feel like the bird is that fleeting song, that concept of, this moment's here and hope it comes back, or it'll be different, or where's it been, And I think that's something that we feel. I'm not trying to go too hard ham on you guys, but.
So years ago, I tried gin for the first time, and that was probably 30 years ago. And to me, then it tasted like celery juice for whatever reason. And I haven't drank it since then. This is amazing. When I opened it up, just opened the bottle, just grapefruit just went wham, hit me. And it's like sipping a floral bouquet. It is really nice. Really like it.
Some of the best stuff I've ever tasted. I can really taste the juniper. Like, it's so flavorful. Love it. How much is the gin in the stores?
It's gonna depend, right? So I can't say necessarily for sure because every store's got their kind of different price point they are gonna be at. But I think on average, you're probably gonna find it between 25 and 30 probably at the store.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Tom.
Can you find it? Is it readily available in most stores?
In Texas.
Okay.
I would say it depends on what part of town right now. They're finally coming up northeast a little more. No offense, Josh, but
no. I mean, well, that's the thing is, it really has a lot more to do with like what the store to store. I don't want to. Sure, you
Market demand.
Market,
If
the
you go
behind
into
the
Moon
scenes world of all that, but yeah, it kind of depends, you know. So some of the bigger stores.
I
will
did
have-
see, I saw it in Total Wine, so I mean that's a major brand, but yeah, smaller ones I guess are hit or miss.
Zara at Moon Dance absolutely would carry it. She's had it on the shelf. And if we continue buying there, she'll keep it going. So absolutely. Just as
still,
what's that?
It's not a far drive just to go to Still Austin.
Yeah, come see us and have a cocktail too. You know,
I always like going down there and have a cocktail and eat at the food truck.
Yeah, the Bearded Baking Company is there right now. They are our fave. We love them. So,
Do you like bacon?
I'm just saying, they have a chicken fried bacon.
Yeah, baby.
It's
And you can smoke cigars on the patio.
we sometimes we really we're not sure about the cigars. Something about kids. We're working on it. We're not quite sure on the cigars, but come hang. Yeah, I guess it depends on the night and who's around. You know what I mean?
I'll take it.
How often do you have music then, Josh? We'll throw that softball at you.
Well, so that's a good one. We want music all the time. I mean, the musician is what it's called, right? Before this pandemic really took off. So I guess about a year ago, we were planning on releasing this in May of last year. We had a whole block party we were working on. As the musician, we wanted to do music all the way. The pandemic has definitely made that trickier. So right now we have one concert a month that we will host at the distillery, but live stream through a partnership with Austin Monthly. And so that's a fun one. We had Jackie Benson just a couple weeks ago. We've had Shaky Graves, we had Shiny Ribs last week. We've done Charlie Crockett, Band of Heathens. We've had some really, really cool times. And that's what we want to do, is we want to share the music. Ben Queller was cool. Try to like live stream so you can enjoy music from home. Because I'm hoping we're near the tail end of this thing, you know. But in the meantime, Zoom keeps us all together all we can, you know.
So just a real quick survey. This is one of the first time. This actually is the first other than whiskey that we've had at one of our virtual tasting events. How many of you guys hated gin and have completely changed your mind?
Oh,
Yep.
definitely.
Yeah, it's kind of across the board. This is one of the reasons why we do this, is just to introduce what these distilleries have to offer. I know a lot of people, when I've talked about Still Austin, we know the musician, but the gin is just so beautiful, and the cocktails they have to go with it are, well, Karis is as much of the, someone had asked right before we started, are you going to hear me say it? Yes, you will. The musician is my favorite bourbon. It is absolutely my favorite bottle. Josh knows this. Josh and I did 50 Zoom events over I don't know how many months, and every night Josh and I were sitting down having drinks together, and I don't know how many cases I went through. And I'm still not tired of it. I still am a fanboy of it. I've shared it with many of you guys throughout the past several months. The gin, got to do the same thing. Karis just made a drink. Would you make?
Honey and a bit of lemon.
You
went that way.
Their Mother Pepper whiskey. And I happen to love Perry Nut with mango nectar.
Yum.
Josh, you mentioned that you use both stills for making the gin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, take it off of the big still. So we make our own base. Now that's kind of, I don't want to say rare, but in craft it might be. The certainly most straightforward way of starting a gin brand is to buy a bunch of neutral spirit, kind of think high proof vodka, and then add botanicals to it, and it will take on the flavor of those botanicals. And we've got this really impressive, badass still and we make our own base, and we still honor that Texas grown grain. So we make a high proof, not quite neutral spirit that is essentially a rye whiskey. And so it's 70% rye and 30% corn. And then after it comes off at just under 180 proof, we'll add that into the pot still, soak in it the juniper and coriander and grapefruit and allspice and all of this. And it's just a touch of allspice and tarragon too. It's like 40 grams, I think, which is very little in 100 gallons. And then distill it and get this small amount every day, 5 days a week, and keep it going.
So you're using a rye base. The bourbon has rye. Is it the same rye?
Yeah. So the rye that is in your glass right now is Elbon, which is the varietal. We've played with 3 different varietals or subspecies of rye, kind of like with grapes. Varietal is the term for the difference between Chardonnay and Cabernet, and like all those different types, subtypes, kind of like dogs, right? Different types within dogs. But the type of rye is Elbon. That said, what you're tasting with the Naturalist is Brasetto rye. And so over the course of the last 2 years, we gradually transitioned the species, the type, the varietal of rye that we were using. And so eventually you'll see Brasetto rye in the bourbon. It's going to take years.
So when we think of rye whiskey, we think Canada. We don't think rye whiskey Texas, and especially Texas grain. Is there a difference between the rye we're getting from Canada versus a rye from Texas?
Yeah, totally. Rye is a cooler weather crop. It's also really hardy. Fun story. The Salem witch trials up in Massachusetts. Can you imagine how miserable Massachusetts was when you got no electricity? It's dark, it's cold, the nights go on forever, it's wet, you've got smallpox and stuff. It sucked. You had rye, and rye is what would grow well in that kind of a climate. It turns out that if rye develops a particular fungus, if it has, I think it's a wet winter and a dry spring. No, I think it's actually the other way. If it's a dry winter and a wet spring, they'll accidentally grow this type of fungus on it. And it turns out that fungus has one of the same active ingredients as LSD. So those little girls weren't witches. They were just tripping. That's why they were like, hey, the smaller BMI, they're much smaller. Big guy's not tripping. But they're like, oh, are you sleeping with you? They're like, oh, shit. It's a witch, you can tell. But yeah, so rye is typically grown way up north like that. Now, corn needs light. Corn needs sunlight. Corn will grow pretty much anywhere. You can grow it in Alaska, but you can only grow it during the summer, right? Because they'll have 18-hour days that far north, and it needs light. It needs a lot of sun for corn. That's why corn belt's often called the sun belt, Rye is more frequently grown way up north. That's why it survives those hardy winters. Now, when you take rye and we choose varietals that grow better down here, you're going to get a difference in flavor. And so it doesn't have to be a seed that's quite as hardy, because it doesn't need to have, it's kind of like, if you go tent shopping, you've got a 3-season tent. Well, the other season is winter. Right? Don't use your 3-season tent to go hike on a glacier. You need a different kind of tent for that kind of a thing. And so the rye up there is really hardy, but down here it can be a little bit more chill. And when it doesn't have quite as much starch, which is it's a hardy, it toughens the seed. Instead, you got more protein, and protein's what's going to come out as spice. And so that's why I think if you have a lot of Canadian whiskey, it's not necessarily going to be quite as spicy as this. It's because it's got a little bit more of that protein. Also, fun fact, Canada can get pretty confusing. Rye is just another word for whiskey in Canadian law. So if it says Canadian rye, that does not actually necessarily mean that there's any rye in it.
Thank you for saying that.
Just to throw a curveball out there. Nothing wrong with that. Them good old boys, we've been drinking whiskey and rye for a long time. That's okay. But just so you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's rye whiskey. It's okay. It's okay.
Josh, on the slow water reduction, the picture you showed had them pouring, looked like a gallon jug into the barrel. Isn't that a bit excessive, doing a whole that much into it at once?
Not really. What you're doing is you're checking each barrel first and finding the water like the alcohol content. And so let's say you got it at 116 proof, then you need to get it to 114 proof. You've got 49 gallons in there. So at that rate, to make it drop 1%, it's about 2 gallons, right?
Okay.
Now
So you also have to measure, like, from the top of the barrel down, how far down, how much you've lost, right? Then to figure that out.
Yeah, so that's another tricky part of it, is when you have barrels aging, there's always this angel share, that evaporation. It's literally evaporating. Over 10% a year for us of the product just evaporates on you. And so what we're doing is, in a way, kind of supplementing it with that water, instead of, once it's done, adding water while it goes into the tank. Instead, doing that slowly while it's in the barrel so that more flavors come out of it.
So doesn't that mean the musician is a cast string?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes it really confusing. And that's why we don't do that. But yeah, we absolutely could release a cask strength at 101 proof. But the internet would roast us. So we haven't yet. Instead, the cask strength that we're going to release is specifically chosen barrels that get the flavor profiles we're looking for without going through the slow water reduction.
Well, do you know what that strength will be yet, or not totally?
I think it's going to be 118. It might be 119.
Well, let's talk about proof real quick, Josh, because I know not everybody has one of the bottles with them, but this is 49.2%. Not 49, not 48, not 50, 49.2
on every single bottle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I mean, you aim small, you miss small, right? If you're trying to hit the bullseye, look at the bullseye. Don't just look at the wall, right? Like what we're trying to do is, it's part of our commitment to that dedication. We found where we feel like it tastes best, and I can tell you because I was there when we tasted it at 49, 49.1, 49.2, 49.3, and 49.4. We went through it to try to find where the whiskey shined the most. That said, we're Texans. We like our whiskey strong, but it's often hot here. It's okay to add some water to it, add some ice to it. We want it to stay strong because you can always add a little water to it if you like. Drink it on the rocks. Drink it with soda even. It's good. Enjoy it in an old fashioned and have some type of cocktail, right? But we didn't want to water it down first too low so that you'd be left wanting that strength. So we made it strong where we liked it, but we made it for you. So I hope you'll play with it.
And Josh, how many barrels do y'all use when y'all are batching it for each bottling?
Yeah, so for us, the biggest tank that AFD allowed us to use is a 9-barrel tank. They were worried that if we had a tank any bigger than that, it would be a bigger fire potentially, which is just a little crazy. It's okay, whatever. But the biggest tank we have can fit 9 barrels in it, which is bonkers. We have to take all of the barrels and figure out how to get each 9 barrels into one tank and the 9 barrels into the next tank to make those 2 tanks taste the same. It's easier said than done, because if you're one of the big whiskey brands, you might take 1,000 barrels and dump them together. And if you do that, that's not even necessarily a large batch for a lot of these big guys, you know. That could be a small batch to them, you know. But if you've got 600 barrels that are all 6 years old and then 200 barrels that are all 8 years old, the difference between each barrel kind of averages out. And so we have a little bit more of a challenge, which is to figure out, well, what's the flavor profile for each individual barrel, so that we can maintain that quality and that consistency.
It's something that I've been kind of saying a lot is we can go pick up a bottle of Blanton's and it's a single barrel. And it tells you where in the rick house it came from and what it was. And this bottle's going to be different. My B is going to be different than my N. It's a single barrel. And everyone gets all excited about it. For me, when I come to a small craft distillery like you guys, where you only have 9 barrels in that bottle, and the bottle I had in August tastes the same as the bottle I had in December, tastes the same as the bottle I'm drinking right now, the craftsmanship to do that is amazing. And I think it's a testament to the skill of what's going on there at Still Austin. To kind of change this, I know there's gonna be a lot of questions, and there's a couple of things I want to talk about. And since it's my event, I get asked. You guys have done some amazing releases recently through the Order of Nancy. So one, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what the Order of Nancy is? And I mean, releases like Monster Mash. You guys just had a release that came out. What are some of these things you guys are playing with? And are you going to do, there's a lot of questions here, so I'm gonna let you ramble. Are you gonna do things like what you did with the PX Sherry Cask finish that we were able to pick up? Are these things that are also coming down the pipe?
I feel like one of the things that we like, our favorite part of this is doing something special. No tour is exactly identical. No experience is exactly identical. It's custom. It's always unique, and it's always personalized and special every time. And so our kind of mindset is we want to have things, our core line of products that are available. Right, we want you to be able to find us at your local store. We want you to be able to go to DFW and see us at the bar, and see us out of town, and eventually nationally. That's important to us. At the same time, sometimes we want to get wacky. This was pretty wacky.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous. I'm just gonna say.
Agreed.
Me too. Ditto.
Just don't get those.
I had to get in a lottery too.
Oh yeah, you just happened to be chosen.
I did. Yeah.
You got a lotto.
You were the one picking the names, weren't you?
No. It was a big hat. And I also
All right. Let's see it again. Does it work through the TV?
Yeah.
So
wow,
Michael
he's
has the
bragging
glasses.
right
That's
Michael
good.
got a
Good for you, Michael.
Somebody's bragging over there with a glass. I saw that.
It's cool. Isn't that cool? We're happy. We think that's cool.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know we didn't
it
get
jumps
one.
out at you.
I may have already promised about half my bottle away to other people already to taste it. So.
Yep.
Yep, that one. But
Yeah, I was able to get
those
two
are
of
more
That's
unique.
a fantastic rye.
Because
Yeah,
every
so what's-
label is different.
Yeah, every label is unique on those.
Like, we like to have fun.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not having fun in whiskey, what the hell are you doing?
Now, Josh, you have a bottle of the Monster Mash. I have the bottle of Monster Mash.
Oh.
Yeah, now here comes the bragging.
Okay, well, mine's open. So.
Yes. It's over. Open it.
Hell no, I ain't opening that.
Open
The point is to drink it.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
He's aiming for a bottle 0 next time. That's why. That was bottle 1. He's aiming for bottle 0.
So I'm sorry, we got off track there, Josh. Tell us a little bit about these
Well, so
specialties.
the idea is we want to have fun, right? Like that's the spirit of all this. Is you want to enjoy the concert, right? I've heard like Tool shows are really like impressive, but like they don't jump around. We like to have fun. This comes from a passion. This comes from our love of the craft. And so we want to express this art. It's creativity, it's imagination. And so the idea of working with different artists, all 3 of the bottles I just showed you are different artists. We want to play. We want to enjoy and have fun and share special things. We're not trying to, be bookers, but like sometimes you have a single barrel of something and there's 200 plus bottles of it and it's meaningful and it's special and you share it. And so we'll have more releases. We've got over a dozen different things aging right now. I'm looking forward to, I might spoil it for you guys. Okay. So we've got the cast strength. We've got the cast strength coming out. That's coming out in May. And we haven't confirmed for sure, but I think it's going to be a Sonora white wheat bourbon. I think we'll see, but yeah, I think it's gonna be that. But it's a weeded bourbon.
I've already told you weeded.
How limited? Yeah, I was gonna say, how limited do you think that'd be if you come out with it?
I think it's gonna be I think it's gonna be closer to 6 barrels.
So I might have a chance. What you're saying?
Yeah.
The Nancy members, maybe.
No. I think Nancy members maybe first. But
We always like that. Yeah.
we want to share it, right? Like we're drinking, we're making it to drink it, we're drinking it to share it, right? And that's what's so special, is like raising a glass with you folks, you know. And so that said, it's still, sometimes you have something that's really small. The Monster Mash, I won't tell you what we did, but we did something even crazier, so that we can kind of keep pushing that envelope, you know. And it may take 3 or 4 more years. That's what's so fun. You know, I see my buddy Zach in here. You know, there's all kinds of really fun stuff that you can do and have creativity and imagination. You know, shout out to Trudio. I saw you guys buried some barrels in the ground to see how they would come out. How freaking badass is that? This industry is so alive and full of energy and full of this desire to try things. You know, eventually we'll have oated bourbon. I can't say we'll have it on every shelf in Texas. Far from it. But maybe in 20 years, maybe we'll all decide, hey, that was the favorite thing. Or maybe we'll decide that these barrels, you know, if they're buried in the ground, they can go so much older and it will change the dynamics. Like there's so much like energy and passion in this industry, and we're still kind of just the tip of the iceberg for figuring out how to make the best Texas whiskeys we can.
We're getting really close to getting to the end of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But there's a couple of things I'd like to bring out of this. And Josh, maybe you've mentioned 2 names so far. We've seen 2 names. One was obviously Mike Delavante. The other was Nancy Fraley. Can you tell us a little bit about these 2? I mean, these 2 in the spirits world are, you know, they're kind of names that are up there on the top. And maybe some of the people who are in here right now, like I'll pull Kendall out again, don't know who they are. Can you maybe educate us on them?
Yeah, sure. So when the founders were coming together, they all had different backgrounds that were connected to whiskey, but not directly in it. So they all knew that they liked whiskey, but they didn't necessarily know how to make it or make it well. And so their research for a lot of the first year that they were working together was going around the country and trying to find experts and get ideas and, you know, work with consultants and try to like get some of this information so that you could make the best whiskey you could. And these are 2 people that started as kind of initial consultants, but became still Austin family full-time after what they did. Mike Delavante, this dude is a baller. He's from Jamaica, and he made our still. He's the guy who came up with this design. He has been distilling for over 50 years. The coffee liqueur that James just held up, we felt like it was kind of a shame that after 50 years as a distiller, it was the first time his name had ever been on a bottle. And so we named it after him because, hey, Mike deserves some love, you know? The dude is awesome. Most of his time was spent at Appleton Rum. He also did a lot of stuff in Canada with Canadian whiskey. But he's the guy who designed the still, and he's the guy who taught us how to use the damn thing. It's a pretty crazy still, and so it's got all kinds of valves, a custom control system. He's the person who really kind of mentored John into how to do it and maintain consistency. He lives in Canada now. He's incredible. I hung out with him once, and we had margaritas at Trudy's. It was really great.
What a thick Jamaican accent from an old white guy.
Yeah, when it comes out, you don't see it coming, and then it's just like it's thick. It's a very Jamaican accent, and it's pretty badass. Nancy is Nancy Fraley, and she's our master blender. She teaches the blending classes for ADI, which is the American Distilling Institute. She's I would consider her very much a top tier master blender in the United States. She's colloquially referred to as Nancy the Nose. It's kind of like a nickname for her. And I've seen her do it. She can smell your barrel and your whiskey, and she can tell you if there was mold in your field or if there was how old it was, where she thinks the oak came from. You've seen sommeliers do this. She can do that with whiskey. She can tell you what the distiller had for breakfast. Not really, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. She's got the skill and the gift. And so she's the one who handles, all right, which barrel goes with which in terms of a blend, and how many stages of slow water reduction, how old, at what time are we going to start the program. She manages that whole program. As I see somebody in the comments, Joseph Magnus blends, Wyoming whiskey,
Westward whiskey.
Westward. She's pretty stellar. She's really cool. Iron Root.
I've
heard of them.
World's best bourbon.
Yeah. So she's.
I had the privilege, and I say privilege. It was absolutely one of the highlights of my whiskey drinking career, probably my life, to be able to sit down at a table with her while she was doing a blending at a distillery. And this woman pulled out a bottle from 1835 cognac and let me have, I mean, it was enough to wet my lips, but I kept the glass. I literally just kept the glass because it's just the smell. But that was her background, was cognac and Armagnac, and studying there.
Yeah. I also had a cool moment like that. One time I was tasting with her, and I was sitting with John, and John was like, "Hey, come on, let's see." And so I smelled something. I was like, "Man, I'm getting a blueberry note." And she like looked at me, and her eyes lit up, and she was like, "Yes, blueberries, exactly." And I felt like tingles on the back of my neck, like, "Ooh, I got one." Next glass, I'm like, "Oh yeah, is that like chamomile?" And she's like, "No, it's not." And I'm like, "Okay, all right,
I'll shut up. I'm sorry."
Cool. I'm playing. This is fun, but it's a good time.
Any other questions for Josh? First, best to Austin. All right. So
I had a
Josh,
question, James.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
So I know with the cask strengths coming out here in a little bit, and y'all said that's going to be like a biannual release. Is that going to lend itself to any potential like single barrel picks for stores or clubs or groups or whatever that ends up being?
I think eventually we'll definitely, I think, start exploring that. Logistically, it's a challenging thing to do. And so this last year has revealed so many things that we really want to see change. We really want to do direct to consumer. I really just want to be able to sell you a bottle and it just show up at your house. You can favor a Christmas tree to your house. You can order a bookshelf from Amazon, and now they have a service where they'll actually assemble it for you if you want. But you can't buy a bottle of bourbon on a Sunday. I just don't get it.
Hey, I sent 3 bottles up to Minnesota.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So it's tricky because we have to have a return address, and they'll know. They show up and it's like, "Oh, whiskey company, huh? How many packages again?"
Put candy in the box
number, right? So we got that paper trail sort of thing. So we're working on it. We're hoping to be able to do things like that where we can get them spread out. But it's also like at each tier of distribution, when you do something like a single barrel pick, what that means is the distributor has to be willing to kind of hold it. So imagine Southern Glazers or Republic, any of the distributors saying, "All right, I've got a pallet that can only be sold to certain people." And then the liquor store gets ticked off if they buy the cask strength, but it turns out, oh crap, it's actually the Probst Guild single barrel cask strength, so it gets logistical and can be a challenge. Right now we're trying to get everybody to like us. So we're trying to dial that back a little bit until we've got a stronger following with everyone.
By the way, we're killing the sherry cask finish of release.
Hey, salute.
By the way, everyone, Ian
Wife looks a little different.
runs production for us over here on this event. Josh, Still Austin is open. What's the story with tours? Because I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you have not done a distillery tour, your first tour has to be with Josh at Still Austin. Period. Absolutely has to be.
It's fun. We have all the toys. We show you how it works. We point at the things like, oh yeah, there it is, and touch this and smell that. We try to make it really engaging without going so like ham with the textbook stuff. We try to make it relatable and something that anyone could really understand. Bearing in mind, it's all textbook stuff. It's all really complicated. But we try to kind of invite you into our nerddom because it's fun. We'd love you to come by. We do tours between 2 and 5 times a day. As we're kind of coming towards, the tail end of the pandemic, maybe we'll see. We're hoping to kind of get back to more and more tours. More and more folks vaccinated and all that. So I think masks may still be around, but we're hoping we can do them back to back, maybe bigger groups, that sort of a thing. So I recommend booking online through our website. That's definitely the best way to secure booking. It's kind of like going to the movie theaters, which it feels like it's been forever since I've done that. But you know how you could just show up and just buy a ticket and go in, but on opening night, you might want to make sure you buy it ahead of time. I kind of think of it more like that. If you're trying to do, Saturday on Father's Day weekend, like you better plan that ahead of time, right? Those things are going to get sold out. But yeah, most of the time it's Tuesday, just swing on by or something. Or I'll always recommend book ahead. We've got a great cocktail program. We do tastings. Right now we're doing mostly outdoor seating. And we're in that kind of Goldilocks period where it's not quite hot enough yet to be miserable. So come on by and hopefully we get through this spring pretty well and we'll have more stuff to share with you soon.
Josh, thank you so much for this evening. I really appreciate you guys. Still Austin has done so much for me and for our club. We can't thank you guys enough. And, we always raise a glass at the end and say, Probst, thank you so much. The gin, amazing. I think you've got a host of new fans here for the gin. List of cocktails that are available. And you can go to Still Austin's website, stillaustin.com, and they actually have some of those cocktails listed on their website to be able to try out. There's also a good link on where to buy. So if you click on where to buy at stillaustin.com, it'll show you the stores and what they're carrying, whether that's the musician or the naturalist. So if you're looking for it locally, you'll be able to find it that way as well.
Fun tip as well, if you go to the website and you're in Texas and you click that part of the website, it'll tell you how to get it kind of delivered to your house. But if you are a little bit more remote, what I suggest, I'm looking at you, Bruce, is click I do not live in Texas, and then go ahead and just check and see if a Texas address works there. I'm just saying.
I will not confirm nor deny, but I have bottles at the house now.
So for you guys who don't know, Bruce lives 3 hours east or west. I'm sorry, west. Yeah, it depends how you drive. Bruce lives out west in San Angelo. Yeah, San Angelo. So we do have members across the state and across the country, and Bruce is one of those. Again, Josh, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, Thursday is our next event. Your tasting sheets, if you didn't get it filled out, this video will be recorded. It is recorded. I'm actually going to stop the recording now, and you will be able to see this on YouTube coming up here in the next probably 24 to 48 hours. Give me a little bit of time to get it done.